What if I told you that the most powerful institutions on earth don't make laws? They make reality. They can raise or destroy nations with a single decision, change the value of everything you own overnight, and do it without your permission, without your vote, and often without your understanding. We call them central banks. And over the last century, they've quietly rewritten the rules of money, time, and value itself. This is how they did it. Set up the birth of monetary power visual. Parchment documents. Candlelight, the first bank ledgers being signed. It began as a practical idea, not a conspiracy. The late 1600s, Europe was drowning in war debts. Kings and merchants needed financing, but gold and silver were too limited. So, in 1694, a private group of financiers offered a revolutionary solution to King William III. They would lend the government money, and in return, it gained the right to issue paper notes backed by that debt. This was the birth of the Bank of England, the first central bank. And from that moment on, money was no longer wealth. It became a promise to repay with interest. The foundation of modern finance was born not from trade or innovation, but from debt creation. The rise, the global spread of the system visual, maps expanding, printing presses, early factories, stock exchanges. As empires expanded, this system spread with them. In the 19th century, every major power adopted central banking in one form or another, from France to the Netherlands, and eventually to the United States. But the U.S. resisted longer than most. It took decades of failed attempts, banking panics, and elite lobbying before the Federal Reserve Act was passed in 1913, on the eve of Christmas, while most of Congress was away. The Federal Reserve was sold as a way to stabilize the economy, but what it truly did was privatize the control of money creation. For the first time in American history, money supply was no longer managed by Congress, but by a consortium of private banks. And this system had one unspoken rule: money must keep expanding. Because if every dollar in existence is created as debt, then the system collapses when people stop borrowing. Breaking point: the death of the gold standard Q. 20th century footage: Nixon's speech. Gold bars fading to paper money. For centuries, gold acted as an anchor, a physical limit on how much money could be created. But wars and welfare spending in the 20th century pushed nations to their limits. In 1971, President Richard Nixon made a decision that would rewrite global reality. He ended the dollar's convertibility to gold. From that moment, the world's reserve currency, and every currency tied to it, became fiat money, backed by nothing but confidence. Now, central banks could create unlimited currency, limited only by political will and public ignorance. This was not just a financial shift, it was a philosophical one. Value itself became a policy, not a principle. Fallout: the age of invisible inflation, visual, stock tickers, skyscrapers, citizen shopping. News clips from 2008, the consequences were immediate and invisible. Credit exploded, economies boomed, then crashed. Every crisis from the 1980s stagflation to the 2008 meltdown was met with the same medicine: more money creation. Central banks cut interest rates, printed trillions, and bailed out institutions too big to fail. And each time, the system became more dependent on artificial stability. Today, global debt exceeds $315 trillion, over 3 times the world's GDP. That's not a bug in the system. It is the system. Because when money is debt, endless debt becomes the only way to survive. Failed fixes: the digital mirage visual, blockchain imagery, data streams, central bank digital currency icons. Now, as confidence fades, the empire adapts again. Central banks are preparing their next move. Central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, they promise convenience, safety, and efficiency. But look closer, and you'll see the next layer of control: programmable money, complete traceability, and the power to approve or deny transactions at will. This isn't evolution, it's consolidation, the final phase of a system that began over 300 years ago. Modern parallel the patterns that never end. Every empire in history has tried to bend value to its will. Rome debased its coins. Britain inflated its pound. And now the modern world prints its way through decline. The faces change, the method doesn't. Because central banks don't just manage economies, they manage perception. And as long as the illusion of stability holds, the game continues. Conclusion, 3 takeaways, and a warning. First, central banks don't just regulate money, they define reality itself. Second, every financial crisis has been engineered or enabled by the same solution: more currency, more control. Third, real power lies not in wealth, but in understanding how value is created, measured, and manipulated. Narrator VO. Here's the warning. When trust is the only thing backing money, reality becomes fragile. And when that trust breaks, everything built on it, economies, governments, even nations, begins to unravel. So the next time you hear about interest rates, inflation, or stimulus, remember these aren't just numbers. They're the hidden levers shaping your world. Soft fade out, somber piano. If this opened your eyes, share it. Because awareness is the first step to reclaiming the rules they quietly rewrote. Subscribe for more hidden histories of money, power, and the systems that shape our reality.